you. Before our last set of presentations, Jacob Fillion, our great partner from Grand Canyon National Park, has an announcement.
Well, it's not really an announcement, and I didn't have anything really specific to say, but I did want to bring this back to you all as a great remembrance of our river trip. No, this was not my oar on the trip. I did not snap it. I'm not sure. Can I say this? It says broken in India Dick, found 1 mile downstream 1 month later, 24.5 mile, October 8, 2012. Grand Canyon Expeditions and everybody who was on the trip did sign it. So I don't know what you all want to do. It's been in my office. It has been a great discussion piece. People walk in, stop, read it all, ask about it. So.
We'll put it in the honors program office, I would think, if you're willing to.
Or we could rotate it. I'd love it.
Yeah, like a rotating trophy. Beautiful.
So,
This is turned to the top. How could one panel fit us all so well?
Now presenting Vanessa Alejandro, who will talk about geology.
So I'm going to talk about the ones who dared. And I'm Vanessa Alejandro, and I'm going to focus on how geologists changed the canyon. How first it started out being the negative, ignored region from the explorers, and then slowly turned into the 7th natural wonder of the world. So, before I go into geologists, I want to talk about these explorers. This is the background before geologists. We have the Ives expedition, James Ohio Patty, and the Coronado expedition. So the Coronado expedition came in the year 1540. It set the precedents for the world. They did not find, this is his quote, they did not find anything and labor was lost, and he did not want to send his lordship an account of it. So already there's this extremely negative perception of the canyon. Then came James Ohio Patty. He was a fur trapper that traveled throughout the southwest region. And in the early 1800s, so already there is a 300-year gap between the first written account and the second written account. And he says he could not describe the pleasure he felt when he left the canyon walls and reached the river. Then we have the Ives expedition. The Ives expedition was a U.S. government expedition, and it came in 1857 and 1858. Now this is a very interesting expedition because as soon as he reached the canyon, he describes it that it was like he reached the portal to hell. There was goblins everywhere and darkness, and he ends by leaving and saying, the region last explored is of course altogether valueless. So from these 3 written accounts, we have, and this is Ives, Diamond Creek. That's where he went down Diamond Creek, and that's where he saw the Grand Canyon, just for reference for people who know the region. So already from these 3 explorers, we see that the canyon is ignored, unknown, and if there is any account of it, it's extremely negative. So now we move on to this video. Now this is a small video clip showing all the sketches provided by the 3 explorers. The Coronado expedition didn't have any sketches. They didn't even bother to produce any type of drawing of the canyon. So there was no one else but them knew what the area looked like. Then we move on to James Ohio Patty, who also didn't produce a sketch. So again, for 300 years, no one besides the Native Americans and these 2 explorer expeditions knew what the canyon looked like. Then we have the Ives expedition. The Ives sketches were dark, very mysterious and gloomy. And if we look, the skies are dark, the rocks are dark, and even the river is extremely dark. So from here, the only sketches we have that the public can see is a dark canyon that no one wants to go to. So the ones who dared are these 6 geologists, Newberry, Powell, Dutton, Walcott, Blackwater, and McKee. So we begin with the first geologist who entered the canyon, John Strong Newberry. So he was on the Lieutenant Ives expedition, and he noted the beauty. He was the first one to say, wow, this place is really beautiful. And he gave the first accurate measurements. The Coronado expedition had come into the canyon and said there was rocks as tall as a man, and sometimes they were as tall as the Great Tower of Seville. But the Great Tower of Seville is only 280 feet tall. So already there's a terrible, inaccurate description of the canyon, and he's the one who said, no, they're actually 3,000 feet tall. And he is also the first to say that the water carved the canyon. So from Newberry, even though the area is still ignored by the general public, he was the first one to spark interest among geologists, which is what the area needed. In one of his quotes, he says, it's the grandest geological section, far surpassing anything I had dared hope for. And if you're a geologist, those words just make you want to go out and see what he's talking about. And Wayne can attest to that. And the second geologist is John Wesley Powell. He is the one who really attracted the entire nation. He gave the theory that the river is older than the canyon, and what that means is that the river existed, and as the canyon, as the area uplifted, it carved right through. And he gave also place names, so like Vasey's Paradise, Bright Angel Trail, Separation Falls, Marble Canyon. So even us as students today experience what Powell put into the canyon. So when we see Vasey's Paradise, we know the story behind it. So his stories continue to circulate in the river culture, and we're affected by him today. He also, I found this extremely interesting, I found it as I was reading his books, is that he actually helped a conservation movement. And at first I didn't notice, but then I started reading more about his expedition and what happened during the same time. We see that before, wilderness is associated with mystery and fear by the general public. And then Muir moved to Yosemite in 1868, and at the same time, Aldo Leopold and Henry David Thoreau wrote writings about nature, and we achieved manifest destiny. And at the same time, the Powell expedition took place in 1869. And his expedition is crucial because he showed that he went through the last unmapped region of the United States, which was the Colorado River and Grand Canyon. Before that, no one had tried. And he came out alive, which is the key point, because that showed that the wilderness was dangerous, but we could survive and thrive in it. So with these events happening at the same time, wilderness became a new concept for Americans, not as I need to stay away because I'm going to die there, but as wow, that's beautiful, we need to preserve it because we can recreate, hike into it. And eventually this led to the National Park Service and the Wilderness Act, which slowly built up until now we have great parks and great conservation in America. So from Powell, we see that he brought national attention to the Grand Canyon, and he affects us today with place names, and he helped this conservation movement. So next we have Clarence Dutton. Clarence Dutton was extremely descriptive. He broke away from the scientific style of writing and talked more about how it was beautiful. He also did have great geological contributions, like applying the law of superposition, which means that if there's a layer below another layer, that means that this layer is older than the layer above. And he questioned why the upper canyon was wider than the inner gorge and why they were at such different heights. And he noted the great unconformity. He also, I found this, I stumbled along it also as I was looking through the canyon history. There's this, you can read the quote, but I'll sum it up. He states that the observer, when reaching the rim of the canyon, is extremely disappointed because their imagination creates this image that was from Powell's work and Newberry's work and from previous people who visited the area. But that the human mind cannot truly encompass what the canyon is. It has to be received slowly to see that there is millions of years of history, that it's older than dinosaurs. So he said until you're there for not long, but for longer than a few hours, will you understand what the canyon is. So exactly a decade after he said the statement, the developments of Harvey hotels and the railroad started popping up around the canyon. So it wasn't until someone said it that the idea could spark in Fred Harvey's mind and the railroad's mind for people to start creating developments so that tourists can stay at the canyon for longer periods of time. So from Canyon, from Dutton, we see beauty, and he helped developments indirectly. I also have another video, and this one shows the sketches, how the sketches change from Newberry to Powell to Dutton. So we start off with the Ives expedition, and then it turns, so we see it's Newberry, but it's still dark, it's shady, and this is an outline found in Newberry's book of the canyon. Very basic, no color. And then we go on to the Powell expedition. And Powell's this is the inner gorge, which is brighter than most of Ives's pictures. So there is a tremendous contrast in the light in the pictures. And his rivers are neutral, skies are neutral, and overall it's much brighter. And then in Dutton we see color, we see shading, detail. So already the images are transforming what the public sees. So we see a dramatic, and this is Dutton's map. So there's a dramatic difference between Newberry to Dutton. So there are pictures that left on everyone's chairs, and you can share them. Now look at the Ives pictures and the Powell pictures. From these pictures, you had to decide if you wanted to go to the Grand Canyon and if you knew what the canyon was. So just talk amongst yourselves, or just to yourself, what you would do if you saw these pictures and had to come to the canyon. And Madeline's going to bring around Dutton's pictures for everyone to see.
Just imagine like pulling up on
I mean, I need nothing but place. This is how I see it now. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, now.
Here you go.
Okay, now that you have Dutton's pictures, so these Powell and Ives expedition was the only pictures for the public. Now that you have Dutton's pictures, you can see that, oh, I might go there. That's a pretty place. But it still changes as we go on. So we have Charles Walcott. And Charles Walcott added depth to the canyon. He found details that others missed, and he talked about the Butte Fall. So he saw that the river paralleled to the Butte Fall. So the river must be younger than the Butte Fall. So he investigated and found a younger age for the river, but he didn't really advocate it as much. So this is a sketch that Walcott drew. That's the grand staircase. That's the sketch he drew. So we're not just seeing a 2D picture of the canyon anymore. Now there's depth to it. There's a different view, so we're seeing more knowledge. It's not just pretty, but there's a lot more knowledge in the canyon than previously thought. And then we have Elliot Backwilder, who was the first person to oppose Powell, which was a big deal because Powell was the Grand Canyon man. He knew everything. So for him to say, Powell, you're wrong, the river's younger, was big. And that just brought even more attention to the canyon because people thought, wow, there's so much here, so much more here than we thought. And they still have only the images that you had just seen. So his theory was basin spillover, which was that a lake would collect and then slowly erode through. So the canyon's becoming more of a puzzle. There's more talk among the America just about the area. And then we have Eddie McKee. His theory was polyphase history. And this means that there was an older river up here, and then there was a drainage system. And through headward erosion, they connected to create the Colorado River as we know it today. He also created the Grand Canyon Association, which focuses on engaging the public. And although there was more attention to the canyon, the Colorado River was still really wild. And he even says, the Colorado today roars as it did in the days of the Spaniard. So the Colorado River is still wild while the rest of the canyon is seeing tourists. And here we see a different type of people. Not the scientists, not the rugged pals, just regular citizens coming to the canyon, but not the river yet. So now today, the river's been dammed, so it's more controlled, so we can actually raft on it and go see it. And the modern theory is that the upper river was created from stream piracy and headward erosion, while the lower was from basin spillover. And this is just another final video of the sketches. So we have Walcott. Now everyone's seeing that there's more knowledge to the canyon. It's not just pretty. And that's a Blackwelder. The previous picture was Blackwelder sketch. And then we have Eddie McKee, where there's different types of people coming. There's color in the picture, a variety of colors, and they're very close to the rim. And then it all amounts to the canyon as we know it today. Beautiful and the seventh natural wonder of the world. But first, it started out as ignored, dark, and mysterious. And now we see it as beautiful and where we love to be. And now it's gone even further to be painted in abstracts and art and in different colors never before seen. So it's gone further than just pictures. And it all comes to this moment, which is the Grand Canyon semester. Okay, so even though I just presented to everyone why geologists changed the Grand Canyon, I know some of you are thinking that the beauty of the canyon, the wonder, adventure, and awe, just this picture alone would have brought people to the area. But really, let's think about it. The image was first negative, and geologists changed this image. And then geologists brought national attention to the area and showed how much knowledge was available. And because they were there first and showed this to the entire public, adventurers came and spread the word like us. So if geologists hadn't come, then there would have been like a 300-year gap, like we saw between Coronado and James, Ohio, Patty. And this is an example I did. I asked all the students to give me a word if they were to describe this to another person. And it was overwhelming, magnificent, big hole in the ground, magical, fascinating, ecologically, and geologically. So most of these words would have not brought someone from China to the Grand Canyon. How many times have we heard, oh, I saw this beautiful place, you have to go. So it's not until we see this, fascinating ecologically and geologically, that people start getting their interest up. And 1 out of 13 people said that. So we just see from here how long that would have took to bring someone from China.
Did you say that, Vanessa?
No, it was Katie. So my conclusion, eventually the Grand Canyon would have been internationally known by its beauty and wonder, but it was really geologists that saw the beauty, explored it, and showed the knowledge that caused the Grand Canyon to become internationally known much quicker. And there's the Grand Canyon semester. Any questions? Yes.
Since there was this lovely presentation on women in the West, I want to tell the story of Eddie McKee. Why he had a very privileged going. Eddie was a operator on the South Rim, and he discovered a lovely young lady who was a park ranger on the North Rim. And so every weekend, Eddie would hike to see his lovely lady on the North
Wow.
Rim. Spend most of Saturday night hike back across and be ready for duty again. And he did this for about a year and a half to 2 years.
Wow.
And at some point, they both decided, this is crazy. And so they got married. And their marriage lasted for at least 54 years.
Oh, wow. That's great. Oh, that's great.
That one I don't know. I think.
Wayne?
Any guesses as to how longer it would have taken had geologists not made the canyon more approachable? I mean, if we didn't have geologists, eventually you said people would come to love it.
Eventually.
Any guesses?
Well, from Coronado to James, Ohio, Patty, that's just a written account. That's 300 years. So give it another 300 years for the third written account. Well, we have Ives, but maybe 300 years for another one that was positive. So then from there, they had to spread the word to come to the area because no one can really live at the Grand Canyon if there's not places. So maybe another 100, 200 years. And eventually to get the businessmen to come out there, which we know can be not the best adventurers. And so another or now maybe 50 to 100 years. So we can see that's going to take centuries.
Would have been underwater.
What do you think the next step in what the image is going to be is?
I think it has a lot to do with the art, because it surprised me how we have no sketches, 2 sketches that are purple and blue and green that aren't. So I think it's going to be a lot more abstract in those sketches, in the visual representation, and in reality, I think it's going to continue being a national park because the National Park Service is doing a great job at conserving the resource and letting people like us go down there and appreciate it. Yes.
You know, one thing that's fascinating is that the controversy still continues. As you may all be aware, if you read Wayne's blog or have watched the news, this new study that came out that says the canyon is much older than we say it is, and it was 70 million years ago that the river, the western part of the canyon, versus what we traditionally said 5 to 6 million years. And this is something we say to a lot of students. You know, it is a great unknown. I mean, there are a lot of their theories, and we feel very confident in our science, but there's still continually things to learn.
Yeah, very true.
So geologists are still arguing.
Mm-hmm. Wayne explained it in an amazing way in his book, Carving Grand Canyon. He says it's like the Grand Canyon is a tree trunk, and its limbs, that each geologist stands on the limb and sees a part of that tree, but really all the theories come together to the tree, and they're all seeing the same thing. It's just the fact that you're standing on a different limb than someone else that makes it so different. So, good job, Wayne.
Introduce Ari.
I can introduce myself. So I get to play on. Play on the computer.
I can introduce you, Ari. I can introduce you.
I can introduce myself, unless you guys really want to.
Just a comment about Ari's presentation. We have some audio, but the audio in the room isn't working, and so we have to be really quiet to hear it when she gets started.
Yeah, really quiet. All right, so my name's Ari Weiner. I'm an environmental studies major here at NAU, and I'm another one of those people that Madeline McCain talked about. I not only changed majors, but I also changed schools. So I'm going to be talking to you guys today about Katie Lee and her love affair with Glen Canyon, the place that nobody knew. So landscapes shape our lives, the rivers, the mountains, the deserts that surround us, and these places inevitably become a part of us all. They shape who we are, what we do, what we're passionate about, and when we're lucky enough, they do find a way into our hearts. And I'm going to talk to you today about Katie Lee and this relationship between heart and place, and how her love for Glen Canyon has had lasting impacts on this region and brought awareness to Glen Canyon and to the issues that are present here, and provided a different perspective on the power of water. Katie Lee was born in Aledo, Illinois in 1919 to Xana and Ruth Lee, and when she was 3 months old, the family moved to Tucson, Arizona. And this is where Katie speaks of her childhood, and this is where she began an affinity for the desert and for the land and for recognizing her connection to place. And she speaks a lot about the oranges and the browns of the soils in the deserts, and how she'd spend time on the East Coast and really missed the desert and missed the open skies. And one of my favorite quotes of her is, she says, "I think green is a bad color." Katie went to Tucson High School, and this is where she began acting. In 1936, when she was 16 years old, she stepped on stage for the first time in the Little Theater in Tucson High School, and she decided that she wanted to be an actress. And this is interesting for me because I went to Tucson High School, and I remember we have a wall of fame in Tucson High, and I remember seeing her picture on this wall of fame in high school, and I had no idea who this woman was. But she was sort of the leading starlet at Tucson High. So she was in 4 leading productions at Tucson High, and she moved across the street to the University of Arizona, where she received a bachelor's in fine arts. A couple years after Katie graduated, she moved to Hollywood in 1948 at the age of 28 to begin to pursue her dreams of becoming an actress. It wasn't glamorous at first. She recalls living on about $10 a day, but she was able to break into this scene, and she ended up with leading roles in a lot of the theater productions around town. And she aired on the first television series to be broadcast statewide called Armchair Detective. And in 1951, Katie was discovered by Burl Ives, who would later become a dear friend, but who was a well-known recorder in Hollywood, and he discovered her ability to play guitar and to share her music with people, and he really recommended that she switch her performing course over to music. And Katie didn't know this at the time, but that would really set her up for some of her later work. She felt really good about what she was doing in Hollywood. She speaks of feeling proud of the fact that she was chasing her goals, but always having this longing for the desert and not really feeling at home and feeling like something was missing. And that though she was chasing her passions, there was this lack of heart in what she was doing. In 1953, Katie was introduced to the canyon by Tad. Oops. Sorry.
It's on top.
By Tad Nichols and Frank Wright, who were both filmmakers and dear friends of Katie in college. Katie returned to Tucson for a show at the Temple of Music and Art, and afterwards they recruited her and they said, "We have to show you this video. We were just down in the Grand Canyon. You have to see what this is like." And Katie was completely blown away by this footage, and she said, "That's where I have to go." And they invited her to come on a trip with them from Lee's Ferry a couple months later. And so in 1953, Katie met Tad and Frank at the Grand Canyon, and this was her first exposure to the canyon. She speaks of, and this is something that Kyle and Claire both talked about earlier, this feeling of being so small but so significant, and knowing who you are but feeling like this little grain of sand. And this quote is taken out of her very first journal entry ever about the canyon that she wrote on the first night on the river. She said, "You can see the way the whole world's put together by looking at how it's been cut away millennium after millennium, and then you feel just like what you really are, a grain of sand in all of this creation." And I feel like this quote really beautifully illustrates what this semester's been about and the power of water, and the beginning of Katie's relationship with this canyon. So Frank and Tad and Katie decided that they were going to return the following summer for another trip, and this next trip was the first of 12 that the three of them would do together, and they were known as the We Three. And so on this trip, they began up in Glen Canyon, and they went through Glen Canyon, through Marble Canyon, and through the Grand Canyon. And Katie's connection to the canyon was only deepened, and she speaks of the river having different personalities. And she said that in the Glen, the river it's in a coma, and there's all the brothers and the sisters, the little side tributaries that are coming into the river, and that there's time to contemplate there. And she speaks of the alcoves and all the ledges and the sandstone and how deeply she was impacted by this place. And on this trip, Katie learned about the Bureau of Reclamation's design for the Glen Canyon Dam, but she couldn't believe in her own words that anybody would be that stupid. And so she just continued to come to the canyon, falling more and more in love with it every time. But in October of 1956, the dam became a reality. And on the 15th of October, the first blast of dynamite struck the canyon walls. And this was really the beginning of Katie's role as an activist, and it really shifted her relationship to the canyon. She was no longer just a traveler and enjoying the beauty, but she started to play a more active role. Katie wrote letters to every political figure she could think of. She wrote to the National Park Service, she wrote to the Forest Service, she wrote to the Sierra Club and to the Explorers Club and to the Secretary of the Interior. Her most correspondence took place with Barry Goldwater, who was the U.S. Senator at the time. And Katie was hoping that Barry was going to understand where she was coming from, because he had been in the canyon and he knew the beauty of the canyon. And so she had multiple correspondences with Barry, and he just said, "I'm sorry, Katie, I agree, the canyon's beautiful, but Arizona needs water." And her letters were feeling fairly ineffective, and she was a little disheartened by it, but she by no means gave up. Her last attempt to stop the construction of the dam, because it had already started, was to try and fight for Rainbow Bridge, which is in Bridge Canyon, which was a canyon in Glen Canyon. Section 1 in the Colorado River Storage Project Bill reads that no dam or reservoir constructed under the authorization of this act shall be within any national park or monument. And so Katie tried to use this excerpt as leverage for a reason that the dam construction should not continue. And there was a lot, she this did bring insight to the issue, and there was a lot of discussion that went on, but ultimately what was discovered was that the Bureau of Reclamation said, okay, we can save Rainbow Bridge, but it's going to require the construction of 2 additional dams, and we're going to have to put in 15 miles of roadway. And Katie was just appalled by that. So those dams were constructed, and Glen Canyon Dam continued underway. But perhaps Katie's most significant and most lasting environmental effects on this region were unintentional. Once the construction of the dam began, there was an influx of visitors to Glen Canyon because people wanted to see it before the Colorado River started to back up and before the canyon was drowned forever. And so to sort of escape this and to get their last chance in exploring in the canyons, Katie and Frank and Tad set out to explore the side canyons before they were gone. And for no other reason than to map where they were and to orient themselves, they started naming these canyons. And little did they know, and little did Katie know, that these names would stick. So this is, I have a series of images of canyons that they named. So this is Cottonwood Canyon. Katie talks about just being tons of cottonwood trees along the banks. And Dove Canyon, because she said that there were just these beautiful little dove nests in the alcoves. Cathedral Canyon, which is really well known for cathedral in the desert. So this is probably one of her most famous side canyons. Dungeon Canyon, because she said the water came up really high and you felt like you were in sort of this dreary dungeon, but there was a little bit of light that would come in from the sky. Grotto Canyon, because it looked like a grotto. And they ended up naming about 25 of these side canyons, and they're all in photographed books, like Place Nobody Knew. So in 1963, the diversion tunnels were closed, and Katie continued to return to the canyon for a couple years as the water was backing up. She got a boat, which she named Screwdriver, but there was a space between the D and the R, so the boat was named Screwed River. And she would take it around and tell everybody, you know, like, the water's coming up, you better look at this while you can. But in 1965, she decided that it was too painful to be there and to watch these places she loved completely disappear, and she decided she wasn't going to go back. And to this day, Katie Lee has never been back. But her activism is very far from over, and in a lot of ways, after the diversion tunnels were closed is when Katie's passion really began to fire. So Katie poured her heart into music, and she started letting her passion and her love for the canyon come out through song. She wrote a lot about the beauty of the canyon, but she also wrote a lot about the politics of the canyon and a lot about what was going on. And she said that at first she did everything wrong. She got really mad and people wouldn't listen to her, and nobody cared what she had to say when she was fired up. And the only way that she could get her point across was to shut her mouth and sing. And one of her most famous songs is called the Wreck the Nation Bureau song, which is about the Bureau of Reclamation, and she coined that term because she thought that the Bureau of Reclamation was doing more harm than they were doing good. And I feel like the best way for me to just share this with you is to play a little bit of the song.
Hooray! Cheers for the Reclamation Bureau. Freeloaders with so pure, wiped out the good Lord's work in 6 short years. They never saw the old Glen Canyon just standing up while they were standing at their drawing boards with cotton in their ears. Come down it blazed.
Okay. So, Katie has a wide selection of CDs that she has made. Many of them, most of them, are focused on Glen Canyon or the Colorado River or the politics behind water in this region. And when asked what Katie felt her biggest impact on this region had been, she said, you know, I think it was my music, and I didn't know it at the time, because it's been in her older years that she started to hear about this, and people are saying, you've opened my eyes to a place I didn't know existed. And I have to agree, just being of a younger generation, I didn't know about Glen Canyon before I came here and before I really started looking into Katie. And she's also written a couple books. All My Rivers Are Gone is just really pretty much her unedited journal that she wrote when she was in the canyon, and Sand Sun Seduction is more about her friends and her time in the canyon with the We Three. And today, Katie is 93 years old, and she's still living in Jerome, Arizona, and she's as fiery as ever. And she's still very, very active in the community. She still is singing sometimes. She's in the middle of writing a third book, actually, that's more about the politics of the Glen Canyon Dam and what was happening, and the Reclamation Bureau and her correspondences with Barry Goldwater. And she said for the first time those are going to be made public because she still has a lot of anger. And she was a huge, huge influence in the coming together of the Glen Canyon Institute, which is an organization that was founded in 1996 to protect and restore Glen Canyon and to reverse the decline of the fragile ecosystem in this region. And so she's still very, very, very active. I was lucky enough, or persistent and stalkerish enough, to meet Katie Lee, and I got to spend a couple hours with her in her home, just talking to her and really getting to know her on a more personal level. And I asked Katie if she had one message that she could share with me that has carried her through her life and that she thinks could carry me through my life, and a message that I could share with people of my generation and my mindedness, specifically you all, what that would be. And this is what Katie said. We have to be really quiet because she speaks sort of quietly.
If you don't follow your heart, you're going to be in very, very
Oops. Okay, so ultimately, Glen Canyon provided the mold for Katie's life, and her heart and her passion and her spirit are imprinted. It's imprinted on this region, and her effects have really impacted this place in the way people think about the water issues on the Colorado Plateau. And to me, which she's given me sort of the gift of reassessing values and asking the question, what is important? And I think if anything, just getting to know somebody that's as passionate about a place as she was and that felt a place so deeply has reinvigorated my sense of place and my love for this place. And I hope that her story has done that for you guys, and that it encourages you to find a place that you feel this strongly about, because I think that's very special. Questions? Emily.
Why did you decide to do your research project about Katie?
It was a long chain of events, as everybody knows. But I think ultimately what really, really inspired it, I was in the library doing research on rubber boats a few months ago because that's what I thought I cared about. And I came across a book, Images of Lost World, by Tad Nichols, who was Katie's friend, and I was flipping through it, and I saw a picture of Dove Canyon, and I was just like, wow, that's super beautiful. And then Robin actually started talking a little bit about Katie Lee and her music, and I looked into her, but it wasn't until I was on the canyon, or until I was on the river and in the canyon, and I felt more passionate about a place than I thought physically possible, that I realized that I felt like I could connect with her to some degree. And I mean, being on the river, especially being at the Marble Canyon Dam site, thinking about, oh my gosh, what if this had happened? I mean, it broke my heart. And so I felt like researching, or just, I don't even feel like I did a research project. I feel like I just got to know her. And that it was just sort of that mutual passion, I guess. Yes. Keep Jess.
Did you have any preconceptions about her that changed after you met her?
Yeah, she's a lot softer in person. When I feel like everybody knows I had some intimidating conversations with her pre-meeting her, but I think when she's really passionate, and when she realized that she could trust me and that I was really just there to get to know her, she really opened up and she wanted to share everything. And I think that's her goal right now, is just to bring as much awareness as she can to people. Yeah. Colleen.
Thank you, Ari, for that wonderful introduction. My name is Colleen Fitzgerald, and I did my research project on the human cost of cheap coal, specifically on the Colorado Plateau and then specifically on Navajo Nation. So just so we're all oriented here, I know many of you are familiar with the region, but for those of you who are not, we are here in Flagstaff, and the area my project focuses on is here, the Kayenta and Black Mesa mines owned by Peabody Energy in the Black Mesa region of the Hopi and Navajo reservations. So before I get into my research, I want us all to think a little bit about coal. What comes to mind when you think about coal? What do you associate with it?
Santa.
One at a time? Yes.
Mines.
Mine. Yes. Santa. Energy.
Black lung.
Black line. So, what? Six. Vanessa, did you have some?
Energy.
Energy. Okay. Cool. So I was thinking back to July. What did I associate with coal? I associated pollution, which a lot of you touched on, energy. I also associated a lot of corporate tax breaks. And then I gave a kind of passing wave to exploitation. That was until I met this woman here, Fern Benally. By the way, photo credit to Madeline McCain. Somehow it got left out of the presentation. We met her in early September when we stayed with her on the Navajo Nation. And she lives just literally a few yards away from Black Mesa coal mine, which was shut down in late 2005, only because its only customer, Mojave Generating Station, was shut down by the EPA due to literally hundreds of environmental violations. So as a result, Black Mesa coal mine got shut down. But the mine she's talking in front of here, which I'll show in another picture, is Kayenta coal mine, which is still operational and only a few miles from her home. So as she was describing to us her life on Navajo Nation and in the Black Mesa region, she stopped a lot to cough into her handkerchief. And she explained to us that since moving back to Black Mesa, she had had a lot of issues with aggravated asthma, so much that she has to carry an inhaler with her at all times. Her sister, in fact, has been taken to the hospital multiple times because of really intense asthma attacks. And that's because just in this region in general, there's a huge prevalence of respiratory illnesses or pre-existing respiratory illnesses aggravated by air pollution from these mines. However, Ms. Benally also explained to us that Peabody Energy, who owns the mines, refuses to acknowledge or compensate these residents for the respiratory illnesses they suffer from this air pollution. So I believe that the residents of the Black Mesa area deserve financial restitution from Peabody Energy because of the two strip mining operations of Black Mesa and Kayenta coal mines that cause air pollution, causing respiratory illnesses for these residents. So before we can understand the problems that we're facing today, we have to understand the problems that occurred in the past that led to where we are today. Specifically, two players who entered the region in the early 1950s through the 1960s. And those two players are John Boyden and Peabody Energy. John Boyden was an attorney who wanted to be a claims attorney for tribes, basically. And at that time, that would be filing a claim against the federal government to get compensation for lands that the government took away from tribes. It was fairly lucrative as far as jobs go in the attorney business, and abridging a lot of history, he eventually became claims attorney for the Hopi tribe and then general counsel. So this put him in position in 1966 to propose a lease with Peabody Coal to get mineral rights to mine on the Navajo and Hopi reservations. And those were the two mines, Black Mesa and Kayenta coal mines. However, as Emily stated earlier this morning, at the time there were no environmental impact statements, there were no public hearings, and most importantly, at least for the Navajo right now, as regards water, the slurry line that Black Mesa coal mine used, they had no source of water explicitly stated for where these 1.5 billion gallons of water per year were going to come from. Today, the Navajo aquifer, which is what Black Mesa coal mine's slurry pipeline eventually used, is now seriously depleted, and the unemployment rates on the Navajo and Hopi reservations are still unacceptably high. However, Black Mesa coal mine has fortunately already been shut down, and currently there's a pending lawsuit against the Office of Surface Mining for renewing Kayenta coal mine's mining permit. This is done by several social and environmental justice groups, and they have literally 17 allegations in this petition for review of the permit. And they can deal with all sorts of social and environmental justice issues. But when I was reviewing this petition, I noticed that not a single one of them dealt with air pollution or respiratory illnesses. And I thought, well, why is that? So when I talked with Andy Bessler, the tribal liaison for the Sierra Club, one of the environmental justice groups filing this petition, he explained it to me like this. It's an issue of sample size. These people simply are not the right sample size. They're not the right group to have a statistically significant health study done on them in order to have grounds for a complaint. So I was kind of frustrated by this. I was thinking, like, there can't be any way that in the year 2012 such environmental injustice exists. So then I thought, well, maybe we don't need a statistically significant health study to have a clear and convincing case. I think in order to convince the public, all we need is a little bit of logic. I think that if we combine the pre-existing science with the testimonials of Native Americans who live in the area today, we can have a clear and convincing case for the public at a minimum. So in order to get a little background on the science, you have to understand something called particulate matter, which is produced during strip mining. Now there are two main important sizes for particulate matter. And I have paper clips to illustrate this, which I forgot to pass out earlier. My apologies. So if you have a paperclip or your neighbor has a paperclip, this paperclip that you're theoretically holding in your hand right now, at its narrowest point is 10,000 micrometers in width. Particulate matter 10, which is the largest piece that we'll be talking about today, is 0.1% of that width. Particulate matter 2.5 is 0.025% of that width. So just so we all are clear here, we're talking about incredibly tiny particles. And why the size of these particles matters is that it's directly linked to the health effects that they cause. So I have this diagram here to help me illustrate this. Particulate matter enters your system in this way. It enters through your respiratory tract, so through your mouth, your throat, your nose. And phase 2 and 3 here shows where particulate matter 10 essentially stops in your system. That's when you're coughing, when you're sneezing, when you're swallowing, you're getting rid of particulate matter 10. What we really care about here is particulate matter 2.5, which enters at phase 4. Now this gets into your lungs alveoli, which allows it to enter your blood system, which causes respiratory issues, heart issues. And what's critical here is that particulate matter is produced during practically all phases of strip mining. That's blasting, drag lines, truck haulage, road grading, and wind erosion. So basically, all the techniques employed at Kayenta and Black Mesa coal mines are causing the release of these emissions, which cause serious respiratory problems. So now we've got the science down. There's also a series of testimonials from Native Americans who live in the region regarding the coal dust that they see in the air, regarding the effects that they see in their livestock, and regarding the respiratory illnesses that they themselves are experiencing. So I'm just going to include some of the best quotes that I got from these testimonials in the interest of time, not all of them, because there are literally dozens, but we'll just take these one by one. So the first is from Harrison Crank, who lives downwind from a dragline operation, and he says, a real fine dust, coal dust inside the house. You can wipe a counter, TV, inside the roof attic. Outside you see the coal dust settle on our vehicles. Next we have an anonymous coal miner who testified in 1999. He said, when we wake up in the morning, the horizon is thick with dust from overnight operation of drag lines that remove the top layers of earth to expose the coal. So obviously, what the activities on Black Mesa and Kayenta coal mines are doing are producing enough particles in the air to make them actually visible, to make them appear on surfaces, on your TV, on their vehicles. So clearly, this is not something that happens naturally in the environment. So the only logical place that these particles could come from would be the mines that these people live so close to. Unfortunately, the people who live on and near Black Mesa are not the only ones affected. Their animals are as well. Selena Begay is a resident of Black Mesa, and she says, we see brown spots on the lungs of those animals. Their stomachs have dirt in them from the plants that are covered in coal dust. Fern Benally says, I see sheep with lungs that are spotted purple and white. obviously, I think we can safely say that these sheep are not working in the mines. You can clearly see that these two women agree that seeing spots in the lungs of their livestock is abnormal, that it's a sign of the sheep's ill health. So the only conclusion we could then come to is that it's what they're breathing, it's the coal dust in the air that's causing these bad health effects. Finally, I think most powerfully are the quotes from the residents themselves about their own health. And I only included one because it's rather long, but I found it to be most powerful. It's from Bilta Bigay, who's a retired coal miner. And I'll just read it here for you. I have black lung, thyroid cancer, and skin cancer on my face. My lungs are so bad that it is hard for me to breathe. I'm given oxygen and have oxygen tanks in my home. I also take medications for breathing. I lost a lot of weight and I cannot eat a lot of types of food, so my diet had to change. I can't really do anything, so I just sit. When I sit outside, I breathe heavy because the air is too strong for me to inhale with the wind blowing. So I have to sit inside. I can walk a little outside, but then I have to go back in and sit down. I never got any money for having black lung. So clearly, I think we can all agree that there's a problem here. So now let's talk solutions. The column on the right are solutions that you might consider as being good, but are in fact not so great. And those include moving away or going through bureaucratic channels, and we'll talk about those first. Next, we'll talk about this column on the left here, which are solutions that we can implement now and that will probably work. That would be conducting a health study, that's something called the Just Transition Plan, and political pressure. So first, let's talk about not so great solution number one, which is moving away. Now, as part of Anglo culture, it's almost a mandate that we move several times during our lives. But this is almost unheard of in Navajo culture. I think the best example is from the 1990s, when many Navajos had to be relocated as part of a 1977 land dispute court decision. And at the time, I wrote this down so I have it exactly right, health specialists agreed that the stress of removal would be overwhelming, leading to disorientation, sickness, depression, and even early death. So obviously, moving is a little bit out of the question. So let's look at not so great option number two, going through bureaucratic channels. I mean, surely there's someone, somewhere you can complain to who can do something about it. But again, this goes to, there's just not the data set. They don't have the health study. They don't have the grounds for the complaint. So at this time, if they filed such a complaint, nobody would listen. But that brings us to solution number one that would work. And that is a comprehensive longitudinal study. We're talking a health study over several years, one that studies the effects of downwind exposure to coal dust. It would ideally have measurements of particulate matter in the air on an annual basis. It would study the respiratory health of residents. And hopefully it would also not be funded by Peabody or the Office of Surface Mining, which has close ties to industry and is currently being sued by all of those environmental and social justice groups. Second, we have the Just Transition Plan, which is basically a plan proposed to shut down both Black Mesa and Kayenta coal mines permanently and shift the economy in a more sustainable direction. Now, I think this plan is really great, albeit a little radical, simply because the tribes would partially own these industries and then would be able to get profits from the industries, get energy into their own communities, and then also any mine workers who lost jobs when the mines closed would then have jobs in these new industries. Most importantly, no air pollution. Third, something that you guys can do today when you get home is you can write to Peabody, to the Office of Surface Mining, to your local, your state, your federal representatives, and ask them to pressure Peabody to give financial restitution to these victims. But before I close, I just want to leave you guys with one thing if you remember nothing at all. And that's, if these Black Mesa residents are successful, they set a precedent for communities everywhere who are besieged by the ill health effects of living near strip mining operations. Just because their community may seem geographically and culturally isolated, it doesn't mean that they're exempt from our nation's tenets of justice and equality. And if the Southwest community does not take a stand on this issue now, they're only reinforcing a long history of Indigenous oppression and injustice instead of moving towards a more just and sustainable future. Thank you. Okay, so I pitched to High Country News, and right now they're saying my take is a little too academic, so I'm in negotiations with them for a new take. Yeah, Clara.
Did you come across any testimonials of Navajo people who didn't want the mines to be taken away because of losing jobs or revenue?
I have to say that the testimonials I came across were mostly biased against the mine, simply because my primary source was a woman who has a pending lawsuit, and she collected the testimonials for that, so they're all kind of anti-mine. Yes.
Okay, first I have a comment. Just so everybody in this room knows who hasn't been to Black Mesa, our very first night on Navajo Nation, we stayed on the Manali's land, and we met Fern's sister, and she had a terrible cough, like right away. She was coughing, and I was really concerned, and I thought, oh, like she probably smokes or something. This is a bad smoker's cough, or she's really sick. And then we found out just the next day that it's from mining. Like I noticed it within 5 minutes of meeting her that something was wrong, and her daughters or nieces were coughing too. And then I have a question: why or how is it possible that the long coat
Built a Begay?
Begay didn't receive.
Oh, why Peabody didn't pay him
Yes.
for Black Lung? Really glad you asked that question. So actually something that I cut out of my presentation was that Bill Begay went to a doctor in Page, Arizona, who was actually affiliated with Peabody, and this doctor assessed his black lung, and he said, oh, your black lung, oh, it came from living near a railroad. And so then he was like, oh, okay, but then he was like, I'm gonna go to Price, Utah and get a second opinion. So we went to this doctor in Price, Utah, and the doctor said, well, you're a retired mine worker. You spent years working in the mines. Your black lung is from Peabody coal, basically. And so because Peabody doesn't officially acknowledge that the black lung came from his job, he doesn't get compensated. Yep. Yes.
How could, when we were looking at Kayenta Mine, Fern told us that one of the air quality monitoring stations wasn't even downwind from a plant, so the results couldn't be. I mean, I talked about the results in the Office of Surface Mining found too, how like the ambient emissions aren't significant.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I would. The National Resources Defense Council actually has a pamphlet on particulate emission monitoring, and the kind of monitoring that they're doing on Black Mesa right now is on a day-to-day basis. So they'll only test for emissions for like one day instead of annually, which is ideal. And not only that, but they tell Peabody on the days that they're going to be testing. So all those activities that I said, blasting, drag line use, truck haulage, road grading, wind erosion, Peabody can just not do those activities on those days, and it's all fine. So those results are just bollocks. Yeah.
I'm doing geology upwind from the area we were describing. I'm very familiar with the fact that there are some very large sand dunes in the area. There are even long sheep dunes and very, very strong wind direction. There's a lot of natural dust in the air already. The reason I offer that is to say that becomes a confounding problem as you begin to study the source of anybody's internal particulates.
Interesting.
It doesn't make it impossible, it just makes it more difficult to sort out.
Yeah, there's just a whole list of complications with that. Yeah, Jacob.
I don't know if there's any effort between what's going on here and what's going on back east around coal mining operations and Black Lung. Is there a collaboration between the two geographic
Actually,
groups?
I'm not aware of that.
I was thinking the
no
same
idea.
thing. I was thinking about the class action suits in places like West Virginia, and I wonder, have these people ever considered doing a group effort, which would begin perhaps by having the downwind tests done to provide evidence if they were to pursue a suit?
That would be good.
My friend Sarah is super involved in that, so I'll connect you guys.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Your people can talk to my people.
Okay.
Anything else?
So before we go to our last set of presentations, I just wanted to give you a technology. Sort of at the beginning of the presentations, I said this is the first time that Grand Canyon semester presentations have been streamed live over the internet, and we have, and I guess also because I have a captive audience, not all of whom are necessarily alumni of the program, thought we'd take just a minute to talk about both the live streaming and our Facebook page. So first of all, if you're not friends with Grand Canyon Semester on Facebook, you should be. Dina's going to talk to us a little bit about what happened with that program after she took it over. And she shared some, can I share the live stream stats and you can do the Facebook ones? So we have the live streaming happening right here. And at any, Dina will be keeping an eye on it through the day, and at any time over the course of the past 8 hours, 6 hours, how long are we talking? We've had between 6 and 20 viewers. And at one point we had more than 50 people streaming this online. So we made it until the end of the presentations to tell you that, so you wouldn't be worried about the at-home TV audience. It was actually 11.
It was hearing yours, Kyle.
And then I really want to sort of take a minute to thank Dina for taking over the Facebook page. So we started a Facebook page when we started recruiting for this program, and I was doing my best to kind of keep it updated, as somebody in their late 30s can do. And then early on, Dina said, "Oh, well, I do all the social media at my school." And I said, "Oh, would you like to be a co-administrator of the Facebook page?" And we went from 23, do you want to take over here?
Yeah, I'll take over.
All right, so when I was handed the Facebook page, I was like, well, I'll see what I can do with this. And when I started, there were 23 likes total. It's like, okay, I'm going to make a goal for myself. I'm going to get 50 before this semester's over. And then I got 80 likes. So it's like, okay, I'll make another goal of 90. And today, right now, we have 103 likes on our page. Facebook has this new thing where you can see the insights of your page, and it shows that people check in at least once a week, all of our viewers. And there are 65 people talking about the page right now, and that's up 550% from the moment I took it over. Our weekly total reach is 826 people. So even though we have only 103 people liking the page, we reach about 1,000 a week. And that's up 133% since when I took over the page. Also, if you're kind of internet savvy or not, there's this thing called viral on the internet. That's when a post that you put gets shared by 1 million other people. And I sometimes, for funsies, go to each one of our posts and see what's happening, like who's sharing those and where they're going. And I have at least 2 posts a week that go viral on our page. So there are places this stuff's being shared that it just gets lost in the regions of the internet because so many people are looking at this. And when that happens, Facebook puts a little icon on your post and goes, "Oh, this went viral." I'm like, cool.
And so the reason we wanted to take a minute to say that is we're not sure we're not sure exactly which direction the Grand Canyon semester will take after this, but I think there are a lot of people at NAU and at NC and NCHC that are committed to having it move forward in future years. And so, tell your friends, tell your neighbors you've been here, you've seen the power of transformative education. We just wanted to, share that with all of you. Before the last piece of our learning celebration,